Now, a lot of people will say, well, I don't know how dogs and cats could have evolved. I mean, they're so different. You know, how could they evolve from a common ancestor? And I tell the story about how in Mexico, there are American tourists who go to Mexico and they buy what they thought was a really, really cute dog, and it turned out to be a rat. Right? So now it's really interesting. It's really interesting because it tells you something about how we perceive dogs. You know, if you have a little Chihuahua and a German Shepherd, the differences between those two organisms is vast. And, I mean, but we don't need a supernatural explanation to explain how these two breeds, the differences in these breeds were generated from a common ancestor. And I believe the most recent data is that they evolved from wolves several times, about 14,000 years ago. So you have these breeds, right? So if we're able to accept that the Chihuahua and the German Shepherd or the Swiss Bernard were both bred, now I ask you, is that macroevolution or microevolution? Now, of course, it's directed evolution because human beings did that. But what you can see is biologically you can generate that diversity from within the pool. And so now we'd have to say, well, is that happening in a sense without reason guiding it? And this is where we'd have to dump the debate about natural selection. But I would always say, regardless of what we say, God is guiding it. So it's never chance versus creation. He creates through evolution. That's actually very interesting. So there is a lot of recent data, especially from the genetics, that suggests that single point mutations can so radically change an animal that it's not as gradual as we had thought. Now, you understand, and the reason being is that we have found these master genes. So there's this gene called PAX6, which is the gene important for the formation of the eye. Now, you'll go, well, so what? It turns out that the eye, human beings, I don't know if you know that there are babies who are born with a single eye at the center of their head. Okay? And this is we think this is where the whole notion of the cyclops came from. And they have a mutation in PAX6, the human PAX6. If you mutate the PAX6 gene in a fly, the fly is born with no eyes. Now, what's interesting is if you take that single PAX gene and I put it into a fly, I can genetically convert one of the fly's legs into an eye. So I show this picture where all of a sudden, instead of legs, you've got extra eyes. Now you've got a whole bunch of eyes that are sticking out. One gene can convert a leg into an eye. Now, you go, well, that's amazing, because you would think you would need gradual changes to go from leg to eye or eye to leg. It's a single gene. And so we think that we don't know anything. We don't even have anything close to an explanation, but we can begin to see ways where we can see a much more, let's just put it, less gradual, much more jumpy evolution where there is a much bigger morphological change than what we would expect. Yes, ma'am.
On a more practical note, if we wanted to have our genes read, there's lots of companies on the web and stuff like that. I mean, I've thought about that just for fun. Are there any more reputable than others? It seems like it would be.
So there's okay. This is very interesting. So I just wrote. We are about to pass the $1,000 genome. In the next couple of weeks, there's a company that it's going to release next generation sequencing, which will mean we'll be able to sequence our genes, our entire genome, all of our genes, for about $300 or $400. Now you'll go, that's really expensive. When you think that an MRI costs $1,000, okay, basically you can sequence 3 genomes for the cost of an MRI, and insurance will cover it. Now, this is both exciting, but also very troubling, for the following reason. Now, I showed you my genome had been it's typed. It had not been sequenced. It's called its haplotype. And what they do is they check particular regions of the Y chromosome, and they're able to figure out my genetic ancestry based on that. But we're now going to be able to identify every single mutation in your genome. Now, what this means is a couple of things are going to come about. First of all, you're going to discover that you have genetic mutations in you that predispose you to some malady later in age.
I don't want that. I just want to find out.
The best way to do that, National Geographic, $99. And you only have to do it for one in the family, right? So my students will all put, like, when I told them about this, they're like, oh, so they asked for their Christmas present. They asked their family to contribute to $99, so then they would have their genomes mapped, and they would be able to tell if they were Vikings or...
That's part of the IBM project, isn't it?
This is the IBM National Geographic Program. That's correct. So I would rather do that than one of the other ones. Like, the other stuff is much... Now, I have students who want to know it. But I tell them, be very, very careful. Because even if it doesn't affect you, I tell you, especially for the women, it says something about your children. And I think for women, that's actually, I find that's more, because I'm a biologist as a priest, so it also happens that people come talk to me who want to ask any of these questions. They'll say, Father, we have a BRCA1 mutation that's segregating in my family. How do I deal with that? So I end up being genetic counselor as well. It's amazing how things happen when you are a priest of Jesus Christ. It's a wonderful postulate. But you get to talk to lots of these people, especially on airplanes, and they have all these questions, and you're trying to answer them, and you're cautioning them because it's not a game. See, a lot of people, it's cool to find out if you're a Viking, but it's not so cool if you're carrying a BRCA1 mutation that's not going to affect you, but your daughter is going to have a problem. She's going to get breast cancer. She's going to have radical mastectomies before she's 30. I mean, that sort of information is really, really, we have to be very careful about how to deal with that. And I'm telling you right now, the next boom, genetic counselors. And I'll tell you, what we need is we need Catholic genetic counselors. We do not have enough, and we don't have many. And the problem is that genetic counseling today is so anti-life that any single mutation is an immediate call for an abortion. And we need to be able to provide genetic counselors who respect the gospel of life, who are able to recognize and appreciate the dignity of the human person, even someone who has Down syndrome. 95% of all Down's babies are aborted today. Yes?
On that score, as a theologian and someone who teaches moral theology a lot, it seems to me that we might need to think about a new category of what the church has traditionally called occult knowledge. Right? So there are things that we can come to know that we actually have no right to know. I don't have a right to know what somebody else's wife looks like naked or something. Right? I don't have any right to know that. I could come to know it, but I don't have a right to that knowledge. Now the question is, do I have a right to this knowledge, the knowledge of the sorts of genes that cause these mutations that would lead to serious
psychological, spiritual, familial problems? Now, I'm telling you, like, the occult information, it's got Facebook all over it. I mean, we, like I was speaking today, we need a modesty of soul. We've lost that. Like my students will post status updates about every little thing. And there's not the sense that there's a part of me that I have to keep hidden between me and my Lord. And this is what I said, St. Joseph is hidden, and he does everything in a hidden way. And so this is an example for that. It's just going to get worse. It's going to get worse. Because now people are going to post, so with these personal genomic services, you actually can post your genome online, and then you can find potential girlfriends or boyfriends by matching genomes. You can imagine, I mean, if I got my genome, I'm now going to post it. I mean, we do. I have to say, I've been impressed by CatholicMatch.com. met so many couples recently in the last 6 months who are getting married on CatholicMatch.com. I didn't understand it because I've never been on. No need to be on CatholicMatch.com. But there's students at PC and alum who have used it, and they've told me about it. So I've come to appreciate. But having said that, putting your personal genetic information online where everybody can see it, number one. Number two, what happens when the government, and the government is not like, right now the government is not so virtuous, okay? And they're demanding information and demanding things that we do that violate our conscience and violate the very founding principles of our country. And so what happens now when all of a sudden you get your genome sequence and an insurance company gets to demand it from you? And they'll say, because you may get sick when you are 90 years old, we are going to jack up your insurance rate when you are 25. You can see that, right? They're going to start putting that all in. They're going to say, okay, not only are we going to have a mandate for contraceptives, I tell my students, are we going to be paying for condoms next? Because basically that's where we're going. And now you have, well, what about this? Now we have a genome too. We're going to have to post the genomes up. And they're going to, the insurance companies are going to go for that. Because if they know your genome, they know what you're going to get sick from, even if you're not sick from it now and won't be for the next 15 years.
The two people cannot get married because they would produce someone with a genome that...
And we genetic counseling has that today, especially, for example, in the Ashkenazi Jewish population, because the Tay-Sachs mutation is so common in their pedigrees. You actually have matchmakers. You have matchmakers of old. I understand they're Jewish moms, is what I've been told. Now the mother of God, must have been an amazing Jewish mom when you think about it, right? And they match. Part of what they do is they actually have you tested for the particular allele associated with Tay-Sachs to make sure that before you even meet somebody and fall in love with them, you've already got yourself tested. But you can imagine how, your kid is born, and within 5 seconds, we know what he'll die from, probability-wise. Any other questions? Thank you very much. Our help is in the name of the Lord.